Okay, so today we're going to talk about subtracting mixed numbers. Yesterday was all about adding. Today we're going to talk about just subtraction, and then the next day we'll do both together, and we'll see how we do. So subtracting, I think, is a little bit trickier than adding because it has the same kind of tricky things about adding, but just a little bit more. I'm going to show you two different methods to do your subtraction, and you get to choose which one you like. I think there are advantages and disadvantages for both. So yeah, so let's go ahead and dig on in and see what we got. Okay. So first, let's start with just one of the easier types of problems. So there's different levels of difficulty. I'm going to call this one kind of like a difficulty level 2. Maybe this is a little bit harder, but not too bad. So let's go ahead and do this a problem together here. Let's say I have 5 4/5, okay, minus 1 3/10. Now I call this a difficulty level 2 because we have different denominators. So we need to make sure we do that first, right? But it's not too bad. So let's go ahead and do this one together. If you want to go faster than me, then you're more than welcome to. First thing I need to do is I need to make sure I know what the LCD is between these two. I've got a 5 and a 10, so I know my LCD is simply 10. That's good. All right, so now I'm going to change my fractions so that we have a common denominator. So I know that 5 4/5, if I multiply that by 2/2, I actually get 5 8/10. Luckily for me, 1 3/10 is already in tenths. So 1 3/10. And then I'm going to subtract, right? So this time it's different because I'm subtracting, but we can do subtracting just, again, this is just like subtracting straight down like when we first learned how to subtract, okay? So again, here are my steps. Common denominator. And then subtract. And then, of course, if I need to, I'm going to simplify. So 8 minus 3 is 5, right? 8/10 minus 3/10 is 5/10. 5 minus 1 is 4. But I need to do this last step, right? I need to simplify. So let's go ahead, and that's actually 4 1/2. Right? So subtract, let's find a common denominator, then subtract, and then simplify. Right? That seems pretty straightforward, right? That's kind of like yesterday, just instead of adding, you subtract. Okay. So those are the easiest type of problems, and you'll see a bunch of those kind of like this. If they have the same denominator, then that's what I would call like a level 1 problem, where you just have to, you even have to worry about common denominator. This is like a level 2. Okay. Now the harder problems happen in subtraction when the number you're subtracting is bigger than what you have, right? And that's where you get into things like borrowing, right? When you learn subtraction, you learn how to borrow and things like that, right? So we're going to do the same thing when it comes to these mixed numbers, right? So I'm going to show you two methods, okay? The first method is called the borrow method. And if you think about it, the borrow method is going to work just like you would do with regular subtraction. Let me just write an example. You don't have to write this down, but I'm going to, just so you guys remember borrowing, right? So like if I had like 35 minus 18, right? I'd have to borrow. I have to say, well, 5's not big enough, so I got to borrow from the 3. That becomes a 2. This becomes a 15. And then I subtract, right? You guys remember how to do that? Yes, right? Okay, so that's the borrow method in terms of regular numbers. So let's see what this method looks like in terms of the mixed numbers, okay? So here's a problem. 2 1/3 minus 1 2/3. All right, so this is where it gets a little bit tricky because when I rewrite it down here, so it's on top of each other, so they're stacked. I get 2 1/3 minus 1 2/3. Now here's the problem. The problem is the 2 is bigger than the 1, right? So I'm going to need to borrow. But let me show you how borrowing works when you're talking about mixed numbers. Think of it this way, all right? And I'm going to kind of draw it out just so you can get a kind of a concept of it. 2 1/3 looks like this. This is 1 whole, 2 wholes, and 1/3. Okay? 1 2/3 looks like this. This is 1 2/3. All right, please excuse my drawings. Okay. This one made a little big. Okay, so I've got 2 1/3 compared to minus 1 2/3. So this is what I'm going to do to borrow. Check this out. When I borrow from the 2, that becomes 1 whole. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this up into thirds. Because I want to be able to subtract away thirds. So here's where the part that people get confused. Normally on borrowing, I just put a 1 here like this, and that would become an 11. But I'm not actually adding 10 more. I'm adding 1, 2, 3. So it wouldn't be a 1 here. What you're going to actually do is add the denominator. You're going to add 3. So now I have 1 and 4 over 3. You see that? Right? I have 1 whole. And then I have 4 thirds. 1, 2, 3, 4 thirds. Okay, this is the tricky part. But once you get the hang of it, it's actually really fast. Okay, so now I can subtract, right? Now I can say, okay, well, 1 whole canceled with 1 whole. So that canceled with there. And then this third will cancel with this one here. And this third will cancel with this one here. And I'm left with 1 2/3, right? 4 thirds minus 2 thirds is 2 thirds. So it's a little bit tricky, but just think of it this way, right? It's just like when you break up, if you said $1 is 4 quarters, right? That's what you're doing. You're breaking up one of the wholes and you change it into thirds. That makes sense? So now I have, so if I said, hey, I have $1 and you want quarters, you don't say, well, now you have 10 quarters. You have only 4 quarters, right? You add however many quarters you're going to add on there. So that's what we did here. We added this part right here, the 3, because we changed 1 whole into 3 thirds. It'll get better with more practice, okay? Okay, so that's method 1 there, the borrow method. It's fast. Once you get the hang of it, it's actually fast, and this is a method I actually prefer. But there's another method. If this is really confusing to you, I'll show you another method, okay? The second method is called the improper method. Now, I'm going to do letter B again, okay, because I'm going to do the exact same problem, but with a different method, okay? So that's why there's 2 letter B's. All right, so again, 2 1/3 minus 1 2/3. Now, the improper method gets its name because all you're going to do is you're going to change both of these mixed numbers into improper fractions, and then do the math. Okay. Now, the improper method is nice, but sometimes it makes a lot more sense to us right now. But the problem with the improper method is if the numbers get too big, then it gets really hard. But for this one, I think the improper method might work better. Let's see. So 2 1/3 as an improper fraction. Remember, we do 2 times 3 plus 1. So that's 7 over 3. Right? And then we have 1 2/3 which is 1 times 3 plus 2, which is 5 over 3. And then we subtract. Seven over 3 minus 5 over 3 is simply 2 over 3. All right, so most of you are probably thinking, ooh, Mr. Leong, the improper method is way better. I like that one. It's less confusing. Let's give the borrow method a chance. I think some of you will actually like that one a lot better, right? Okay, so those are the two different methods. Let's do a problem where we do both methods side by side. And then after that, you can choose which one you like, all right? So here we go. So I'm going to do this. Borrow method, improper method. This will be letter C. Okay, here's the problem. 11 and 2/5 minus 2 and 3/5, okay? All right, so let's do the borrow method first. Again, the more practice you get with this one, the easier it actually becomes. 11 and 2/5 minus 2 and 3/5. All right, so now we know we need to borrow or something because the bottom is bigger. So we're going to borrow from the whole number. All right, here we go. So the 11 becomes a 10. And the 2 doesn't become a 12, right? You don't just say, oh, that's 12, right? You don't do that. Remember, you got to add 5 here so that it becomes 7. And now you just subtract. Seven minus 3 is 4. 10 minus 2 is 8. All right. So again, the hardest part is remembering that you don't, is this part here, that you're going to add 5. You're going to add the denominator. Okay, let's try this one using the improper method. 11 and 2/5 as an improper fraction. 11 times 5 is 55, plus 2 is 57. 2 and 3/5 is 13. So then we go ahead and we subtract. 57 minus 13 gives me 44 over 5. And this is one of the reasons I like the borrow method. With the improper method, you need to now change this to a mixed number. So there's kind of one more step. So, okay, I know that 5 goes into 44 8 times with 4 left over. Both answers get you to the same place. All right. From here on out, you get to use whichever method you want to use, okay? Again, I like to borrow. I think it's a little faster. I think the improper, sometimes the numbers are kind of hard, especially if the numbers get really big. But if you like the improper method, then I would say go ahead and use it, whichever one you kind of like better, right? We're going to do a few problems now together. or I'll give you guys a chance to do them. Put your answer in the chat, and then also tell me which method you use. I'm curious which method people like to use. All right. So here we go. Here's the problem. 5 and 3 over 12 minus 4 and 11 over 12. Okay, go for it. Put in the chat once you think you got it. Use whichever method you prefer. All right, so far we're looking pretty good. Anyone who's replied or put in the chat so far has gotten it right. So far, good. I see some people are using borrow method. Okay, cool. Oh, sorry about that. All right. So let's see. Here we go. Let's go ahead and go over this. All right. I think a lot of you guys are doing borrow method here, right? So let's see. 5 and 3/12 minus 4 and 11 over 12. All right, so again, here's what I would do. I would say, okay, that becomes a 4. And again, that doesn't become a 13. That actually becomes a 15, right? Add 12. 15 minus 11 is 4 over 12. 4 minus 4 is nothing. And then you guys are so smart. You're like, wait, 4 over 12 is not the right answer. You know you have to simplify that to 1 over 3. Yeah? All right. Improper method, people, if you want to do it that way, you would have done it like this. 63 over 12, and this is 4859 over 12. Subtract those, and you get 4 over 12, which is still 1/3. I'm just curious, how many of you, maybe just kind of show your hands on the screen, how many of you guys are using the borrow method? Like, that's the way to go. Borrow method? All right. How many of you guys like the improper method instead? All right, that's you. Okay, cool. Right, I had people that got them right on both sides. Okay, here we go. Let me give you guys another one. This one is going to be even more challenging, but let's see if we can do it. Okay, go for it. Very good. All right, put in the chat once you think you got it. And again, use whichever method you like. Not quite. Double check on that one. This is, this is more of a, that's better. Yep, good. Yeah, this is one of the more difficult ones because we don't have common denominator. So we need to make sure we have that. Okay, good job. Those who are putting in the chat, good job. Good job. You guys are killing it. Good job. Good job. So far, everyone's put in the chat's gotten it correct. Good job. All right. In the interest of time, I will kind of start going over it slowly, and if you need to catch up. And again, if you're still having trouble with this, that's okay. We're going to spend a little bit more time on this tomorrow, both adding and subtracting. So sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to get it right. So here we go. Borrow method. Well, first thing I need to do is common denominator. So I'm going to say we know that 12ths are my common denominator. So I can multiply this by 4, this one by 3. All right, so that becomes 3 and 4 over 12, and that becomes 1 and 9 over 12. All right, so let's subtract. Let's do a little borrowing. That becomes a 2. That becomes a, not a 14, but rather a 16. 16 minus 9 is 7. 2 minus 1 is 1. There you go. That's your final answer. If you like the improper method, this is how you would do it instead. So I got 3 and 4/12. I've got 1 and 9/12. So that is 36/40 over 12. That is 21 over 12, which subtract those, I end up with 19 over 12, which simplifies, or in mixed number form, is 1 and 7 over 12. All right, so that's how you do these. There's 8 problems for your homework, which you hopefully can be able to do. Some of them you don't even need to borrow. Okay, that's the other thing. Remember, don't try to do the borrow method or improper on all of them. Some problems might be like the one that we did in the very beginning, where it just works out, right? Where you can just subtract and that's it, and simplify. So use whichever method you prefer, and that's the one that you can kind of go with. And if you feel like you can want to switch back and forth, you can do that as well. So there we go.